should commence in time.
Good evening, sir. May I have your permission to begin, sir? Thank you, sir. Jai Hind and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On the occasion of the 22nd anniversary of the Kargil Vijay Diwas, we are truly honored to have with us none other than our former Chief of Army Staff, General V.P. Malik, PVSM, AVSM, who led the Indian Army to victory in that brief but deadly conflict. It gives me great pleasure to welcome him and thank him on behalf of all members of CASA in agreeing to share his experiences with us. Amongst the many motivational statements he made during the war, one really does stand out. While addressing troops in Dras, General Malik said, and I quote, "The enemy has started the fight, but it is we who will fire the last shot. The war will end only on our terms. It is not important how a conflict starts, it is important how it finishes." Besides being a realist, he also said, "We shall fight with what we have." With these telling statements that resonated at all levels, he not only emphasized that his faith in the courage of the troops of the Indian Army was not misplaced, but he also injected a sense of urgency and a single-mindedness of purpose. With his vision and clearly spelled out goals, he ensured that we succeeded in our mission. As most of you would know, General Malik has also authored a book on this conflict titled Kargil, From Surprise to Victory, which is arguably the best book on that war amongst many other books written on it, as General Malik does not pull his punches and says it like it was. So we are indeed privileged to have General Malik share his thoughts with us on this important day. He'll be in conversation with Lieutenant General Satish Dua on applying the lessons of the Kargil conflict in today's scenario. Lieutenant General Satish Dua, PVSM, UYSM, SM, VSM, had served in the Kargil Brigade as a brigade major from 1993 to 95 and has commanded his battalion on the line of control during the Kargil War. He later commanded a division and, more importantly, commanded 15 Corps overseeing counterinsurgency ops in the Kashmir Valley. In his last assignment, he was Chief of Integrated Defense Staff. We now look forward to an absorbing and a stimulating discussion. Over to you, General Dua.
Thank you very much, General Murthy. Jai Hind, everybody. And once again, sir, may I also repeat that it's such an honor to have General Malik here on this important day. And I'm so grateful to you, sir, for taking out the time. I know you're flitting between engagements today, and we are indeed fortunate to get some exposure on this important issue from you. In keeping with the audience, sir, this is not going to be a run-of-the-mill talk about what happened in the war. We all know that by now. We are looking at your insights, sir, on how it impacts us today. So I know that you are also short on time. We have about 40 minutes or less. I'm going to request you, sir, to make your opening remarks. But after that, I am going to take it in a conversational flow with you before we open it up to the house for question and answers. And all the viewers, request you to post your questions now, because you will not get a chance to ask your questions. Please post your questions and I will be asking the questions on your behalf later. General Malik, sir, may I request you to make your opening comments before I get into a conversation mode with you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, General Dua and General Murthy. General Murthy, for your very kind remarks. And also, I'd like to convey my Jai Hind to the complete audience, everybody who's watching and listening to this program. It's good to be amongst the strategist community and go over the questions which really affect us, our security today and tomorrow. And I'm looking forward to that kind of a discussion too. All I would say is that this was a unique kind of a war where we had not expected. We were totally surprised. And just 2 months earlier, our Prime Minister had gone to Lahore and signed a declaration, Lahore Declaration, in which both the Prime Ministers had signed an agreement that we will not have any more conflicts with each other, and we shall uh, resolve all our issues amicably through discussions. And more importantly, both nations had become weapon state, nuclear weapon states, which had been carried out, tests had been carried out only a year earlier. And I think that burden was there on the shoulder of both the prime ministers. And they realized that hereafter it will not be possible for us. Incidentally, the whole international community had started calling us rogue nations for having carried out those tests. So that burden was there on both prime ministers. And yet, within 2 months or so, the Kargil, the Pakistan army managed to intrude into our area, and they occupied certain heights on the northern side of the road, between the road going from Zojila to Kargil to Leh and beyond to Siachen, and the line of control, very clearly crossing the line of control, and they occupied those heights. Now that was another, I would say, a setback, because the brigade which was posted there in that area, they had very large gaps, and during winters those gaps became longer. And as a result, through those gaps, the Pakistani army, their advanced parties, mostly in salwar kameez, black salwar kameez, giving an impression that they are mujahideen, jihadis. They came and occupied those heights. So it was a double whammy, you can say, and we had to react to that situation. And all the other challenges were there, because fighting with large strength in those areas had never been done earlier. We were now fighting at a height of 10,000 to 20,000 feet. And we had those challenges of not knowing where these intruders have come, Pakistan army has come, and what all heights that they have occupied. So we literally had to go very slowly. Should I say that it was a very thick fog of war. The other challenge that we had was that we were told not to cross the line of control. That was a mandate given to us. Do not cross the line of control. So we were asked to throw out the enemy from within our own country, from within our own land, but not to cross the line of control. So these were some major challenges, and we had to fight under those constraints. We had to work out our military strategy accordingly. And the fighting was also, as you know, that unless you have good information and good intelligence, your tactics and your operations will be according to what information you have got. And there, I would say, our intelligence agencies and our surveillance, because they failed, it was a real setback for us. And it took quite some time to convince not only the everybody in the army, our armed forces, but also the cabinet. And we kept saying that, look, these people are holding grounds, and they are now being supported by the army, and they were artillery, etc. And also that they were having helicopter support. So while we were challenging the intelligence assessment that your information is not correct, and somehow the intelligence agencies kept on endorsing whatever the Pakistan was trying to convey through their deception plan. So that was a big challenge. But finally, I would say that once we got going, we reorganized ourselves, and we got the permission from the cabinet that all three forces will work together. And in case we have a situation where it becomes necessary, then we should be permitted to cross the line of control or the international border. That was not done initially, but after some time, when the Prime Minister kept saying, he made two statements in public that I have told the armed forces not to cross the line of control. So I had to then tell him that, look, this is not a correct statement. In case we cannot undo what has happened in Kargil war, in Kargil sector, we will have no alternative except to, which he accepted. In fact, in the evening only, he sent the NSA, Mr. Vijay Mishra on a TV network, and he made an announcement that not crossing the line of control holds good today. We don't know about tomorrow. Now, the military strategy, very briefly, Satish, was that we would put pressure all along the western border. Army, Navy, Air Force. The Eastern Fleet of the Navy, it moved from Bay of Bengal to Arabian Sea and started tailing their ships, particularly the oil tankers, Pakistani oil tankers coming from Dubai to Karachi. The Air Force, of course, was ready on the complete front, on the Western front also, beside giving the support to us in Kargil sector. And as you probably would remember, that we had a large number of dual task formation, which moved those dual task formation to the Western sector. And all the strike formations were put on a notice of 6 days for entering the enemy territory, either IB or LOC, if required. Finally, the war was won on the ground, obviously, by the both army troops, the infantry battalions supported by artillery, and tremendous courage that I saw. Every action, every peak that was recaptured is a story which will always be remembered. We had good support from the strategic level as well as tactical level from the Air Force. And of course, I must also say that it was a blend of political, diplomatic, and military action that finally won us the war.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for very concise commentary at the level and pitching it at the level of this discussion, sir. Thank you so much. And only you could have come out with that crisp comment and enriching our knowledge. So thank you very much. Although, and I just take last of your a few sentences of yours to say the victory was won by these young soldiers, these young leaders. There was astounding amount of bravery. Today, if we are not talking about it, it is only because we want to pitch the discussion to another level. But the astounding amount of bravery of the soldiers, 527 of those who laid down their lives, 1,367, if I have my figures right, were grievously wounded, and many, many more unsung heroes. And the victory was ours. And thank you very much, sir. And we salute everybody. But an issue about Kargil war. You yourself brought out, sir, that we did not expand it for various reasons. It did not go beyond the LOC. You also saw that it did not expand beyond the region of Kargil, not even to the rest of the LOC. Without getting into a discussion about that, while the war was contained, it was also, incidentally, if I have my facts right, it was the longest war that we have fought in modern times in terms of duration, number of days. But contained as it might have been, it has brought out some very telling lessons for our country. I think this is the first time that the country as a whole has taken note of our inadequacies, instituted review committees and studies into learning from our mistakes or shortcomings as a country, as a nation, has instituted group of ministers was appointed, task forces were formed, and recommendations were made public. Now that is something that was a very bold step taken. Reforms were instituted. Those reforms 2 decades ago were very evolutionary, or sorry, even if they were reactionary, because they were as a reaction to the lessons learned in the war, but reforms that talk about integrating and enhancing the combat potential of our 3 services and all the enablers together. That process takes time, and that process has been on. In fact, as we all are aware, those reforms have recently picked up some unfinished parts of the reform, and the appointment of CDS, the formation of the Department of Military Affairs, etc. Sir, may I seek your comment on that issue of how Kargil wars, the lessons from Kargil war, have helped shape our structures, processes, our mindset? Some of it is work in progress. And how do you see that? And how do you, what would be your comment on the reforms or the churning or the differences that are taking place today?
Satish, first thing I must say that the Kargil Review Committee was instituted by the government, which had Mr. Subramaniam, late Mr. Subramaniam, as the chairman. And we had a very well-known journalist, Mr. Vijay, and General Hazari, A.K. Hazari. They were the other two members. And it was, I would look back and I would say it was an excellent decision taken by the government to have such an inquiry, such a report given. And the other good thing was that it was made public. Not the complete report, but most of it, I would say. It is today also available in a book form. So that was a good step that was taken. And what the KRC observed, and I'm just giving you a few important observations that they made, was that firstly, they felt that there is no clearly defined national security objectives in our country, and they also observed that there was a crisis of confidence between the civil and the military officials within the Ministry of Defense regarding their respective roles and functions. And they also observed about the lack of synchronization, lack of synergy among the three services, because that also, although I would say that after 23rd, 24th of May, there was a fair amount of synergy at the strategic level, but at the lower level, still there were shortcomings. And they pointed out about the lack of synergy and jointness. And also they pointed out about the duplication of procedures that we had, because the armed forces were functioning as departments, and the Ministry of Defense was another sort of a setup, and there was so much of duplication, and therefore the waste of resources. Now, primarily, I think their intention was, quite rightly, that unless there is adequate synergy, the effectiveness of our armed forces will be lacking. And today we all understand that the effectiveness of the armed forces, of the force level that we have got, can only be achieved if you have total synergy. And secondly, it is also the most economical way of fighting today. So with these things which they brought out, and this report was picked up by the group of ministers, and they endorsed it almost wholly. Now, as far as they pointed out the weaknesses in the Chiefs of Staff Committee. Chiefs of Staff Committee, I was the chairman of Chiefs of Staff Committee, but I didn't have any additional power. I was one amongst all the other people as an equal person. I mean, although we were functioning as a team, but there was no final decision maker. We could have difference of opinion on budgetary aspects particularly. So there were these shortcomings, and that is how one of the major recommendation was to have CDS, Chief of Defense Staff, and integrate the Ministry of Defense in a manner that we can have a collective action, jointness, and synergy that is required in policy making as well as in the execution of our policies. One of the major things that was shortcoming was the defense planning part. All three services, they planned for their own respect, and ultimately our defense plan was A plus B plus C. And some places the Ministry of Defense would act with their own judgment, but otherwise, basically, it was not looking after each other or having a joint policy, but it was defense planning was just, as I said, A plus B plus C, that kind of act. So the important recommendation was CDS, which unfortunately was not accepted at that time. And as you know, it took 20 years to come. Although we had the government established the integrated defense staff, and you've been yourself looking after that department for some time earlier. But, unless you have a head sitting over the integrated defense staff and who has a certain amount of authority and responsibility, it cannot function in the manner that one would like to see. And that's exactly what happened. So it took many years to first get the CDS, and then now they have announced these two departments of the DOD as well as DMA. I would not like to go into the effectiveness of the present organization for the simple reason that we've just had it very recently. We have yet to see the results.
Yes.
At the moment, and it is a unique organization which has been formed, because nowhere else, anywhere in the world, we have this kind of division of responsibility between the DOD and the DMA. I'm not too sure whether we will achieve the kind of integration that is in the mind of our strategic community, but rather than passing any judgment at this stage, I would say let's see how it proceeds further.
Fair enough.
These are the comments that I would have, why it became necessary and how we have followed it up.
True, sir. Thank you very much. And like you brought out, this Chief of Staff Committee was not very effective. I have also been a member of the Chief of Staff Committee, and I realized that it is not effective as in the earlier form. And like you pointed out, an IDS without a proper CDS and under the CISC was not as effective as it could have been. So to that extent, we really hope that the office of CDS and that of the DMA will add value. And you are right, sir. It's early days. It will take time to settle down, but I'm sure it will find its place. But sir, I'm tempted to ask you one supplementary on what your remarks. Like you spoke about crisis of confidence between civil and military. It will take time. I mean, now some process has started.
No, I agree.
But and we should give it that time. It has taken that much time in every country. But national security objectives, you are right, sir. What was observed then, even now, there seems to be no movement towards that, if I may say so. I mean, RM's op directive, we all here who are informed understand that it's something that we make by ourselves, but it does not really have a sanction of the nation. So that national security objectives is something that's, or call it by any other name, national defense strategy or any apex level guidance document, is something that still eludes us, and something I think that is fundamental, that should actually be the start points. May I have a very brief comment on that, and then I'll move on to
I agree with you. Look, firstly, we have to have a national security strategy based on policy that we have got, and this cannot be left to the armed forces or within the Ministry of Defense. It has to be whole of the government approach, and so this is important. I have known about the RM directive, etc., but those are again at the level of, the three services, etc. What is very important, which I do not see even today, and I must observe that, and that is that the armed forces are not in the loop of security policy making and following it up. And today, if we have to react fast, which is what the requirement, operational requirement, strategic requirement is, that on security issues, you can't afford to waste time. Yes. So unless you put the heads of the services and the CDS in the loop of decision making, it will always be, your decision will be delayed and your reaction will be delayed. And that requires political and military thinking side by side. It can't be that first the political authority along with the MEA takes a decision and then it starts informing the three military services. So you require that kind of cohesion at the very first level of decision making or policy planning, which I don't see it yet. And I think that is a major requirement. That is something on which we should follow up. And you are quite right that we still have to work a lot more on the High Defense Control Organization to cope up with the kind of challenges that we have today or we are going to face tomorrow.
So, thank you, sir. I am looking at the questions that I had in my mind, and I'm also looking at the questions that are coming up through the chat, sir. And two prominent threads come out. And I'm just going to mention that and then ask you the first question. One is parallels with the Ladakh situation. What happened in Ladakh last year? Here also, while we have been having face-offs with China, both in the area of Sikkim and here in Ladakh for last decade or more, but that it came to this was for the first time, that it came to casualties, that it came to a firing of shots, that happened for the first time in half a decade, approximately half a century. And what parallels do you see, sir, both in terms of how it happened and also in terms of how our reactions have been in the tactical operational terms, as well as in the realm of intelligence issues, sir?
Um, I think I'm going to take the intelligence part first. Okay. I have mentioned already.
Sorry for interrupting. I said there were two, sir, two threads. The other thread, as you can expectedly understand, there are many questions on intelligence, what their shortcomings, intelligence failure, how it happened in Kargil. And you did mention in your opening remarks about how the intelligence agencies were trying to, or not, I won't say trying to, at that moment, they believed that it was intruders, etc., and how it affected our operations. So you did.
Yeah.
You
so that was, I think it's important because it is based on intelligence and information that you have. You know, all your planning, whether it is a macro level or at a micro level, depends on that. And that was a major setback, major failure during the Kargil war. Yes. And one was hoping that after that, all the advice and the recommendations given by the KRC, things will improve. Now, coming to the situation in Eastern Ladakh. You know, firstly, I must mention that it is not fair to compare a situation that took place 20 years ago with what is happening today. You know, the wars are never fought as they were earlier. You always have to think of the future. And that's why they say that don't train for the last war. You have to train for yourself for the next war. There were some plus points here. One, of course, I would say that politically, earlier policy used to be, even during Kargil war, was defensive reactive. You know, even in our reaction, we tied our hands. Don't cross the line of control. Don't cross the border. Now, that was the very cautious defensive approach. One can understand that, yes, we had become nuclear nations and we were now fighting under the nuclear umbrella. But I think now when I look back, I think it was far too defensive. While that was not so in Eastern Ladakh, where we not only put up some fight in Galwan Valley, but also we captured Kailash Range. We occupied Kailash Range. Now that was an offensive, proactive action. So there is greater proactiveness today, I see, at the political level, and much more than what it used to be in earlier days. That is one. The second thing, unfortunately, intelligence, I still feel that there are shortcomings. We knew that there were two Chinese formations, PLA formations, which were carrying out training in Tibet. About that, there were reports in the newspaper, and yet we did not sort of make an assessment that what they may or may not be able to do. And I would also mention about the surveillance. Today, we are much better off in surveillance. We have the satellite imagery, we have continuous satellite imagery, we have the UAVs, and we have other sources. But even now, I would say that our human int as well as our technical int has not really caught up with the time that we are seeing today. And there is a requirement of better collection, collation, and timely assessment. That is the second thing that I would mention. The other part is that, good part is that I think the joint action was much better this time. Right from the word go, the Air Force and the Army, they were together. One could see that the way both the chiefs went to Ladakh and coordinated action, stayed there for some time, and that coordinated approach, both at the strategic level as well as at the operational level, was heartening. Was much better than in the initial stages that we saw during Kargil war. So there have been many improvements, but then there are a few shortcomings which need to improve on that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I'm just going to read out a question from somebody who's asked a question exactly the way it is. I'm not clubbing any questions. How do we increase the fear and costs? This is from Rohit Moite. How do we increase the fear and costs for the enemy in any future possible aggression or intrusion into India across borders?
Look, we have to have, although we are now, both the fronts are alive, both the Western Front as well as Northern Front, and we are not talking of two-front war, etc. But let's be very clear that as far as Pakistan is concerned, we can't let them take any chances. So if they have another action like 26/11 or what happened, during Uri or Pulwama, etc., we must answer them strongly, and that is the only way of deterring them. Even when now we are talking in terms of these drones coming into our area and dropping explosives or rifles, etc., I think we have to take strong action, not only from the defense point of view, but also proactive. A message must always go to Pakistan. We will not take any. Otherwise, we are not talking to them today. Why? Because they are not stopping it. So how do we, make them more cautious on these fronts? It is only by deterring them again and again whenever it is required, and strongly. Now, as far as China is concerned, it's a much bigger issue, and it involves not just the territorial integrity of our country, but there are many other issues also come into that. And we should be realistic. We know that today, technologically, they are far ahead of us. So there is a lot of improvement required in our technology, and as far as the defense forces, this thing is concerned. But then there are other ways of sending messages. For example, economic messages we can send. We can also send at the geopolitical level, like we have the Quad today, and the way we are functioning today in the Pacific Ocean, our Indian Ocean, etc. And when we are talking of Atmanirbharta, where we have to send a strong economic message to China. Unfortunately, what I notice now is that even despite what has happened last year, our imports from China have increased today. So what kind of a message are we sending? That we are still dependent on them. So those messages must go. And in the meantime, we must continue to improve our infrastructure, improve the technology of the defense weapons and equipment, and be ready to take them on in case they cross. Wherever we have a skirmish, we must come better than them at that level. I don't think we can afford to go for an all-out conventional war. We have to be careful that we should stay away from that. But we must retaliate if there is any skirmish, where is any encroachment into our territory. So that must be retaliated strongly.
Yes, sir. And you are right about, let's say, I'll take the example of what you mentioned about China. Our economic linkage with China continues despite our issues at the border. But in today's world, sir, I think all the elements of power, there have to be very strong linkages between them. During Kargil war also, we did have this issue. And you yourself brought out the fact that the world was very wary of us, because just a year ago, both the countries had carried out those nuclear tests, and countries were classified as rogue nations, as you brought out. So world was very wary, and that is why everyone played a more important role in it. I have a question at the end of this from Mr. Manoj Mohanka. And it's an interesting question. Had the USA not interceded with Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, would we have come out victorious?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Let there be no doubt about it. Because by the time Nawaz Sharif went running or begging literally to USA, don't forget we had already recaptured 85 to 90% of our area. And the writing was on the wall. Let there be no doubt at all in anybody's mind that it was just a question of days. In fact, when the Prime Minister asked us, or asked me personally, that should we agree to a ceasefire, not on the 4th of July, but even later. And my first answer to him was no, and we had 3 meetings. Finally, when he managed to convince me, and, we went to, and then as a cabinet, they took the decision. But let there be no doubt in anybody's mind that it was just a question of days, while no doubt that President Clinton did some arm twisting of Nawaz Sharif, and he made him sign a document, etc. But the writing was on the wall. It was just a few days, question of few days, and we would have physically thrown them out from wherever they were, on our side. We had already achieved all the major objectives. There were a few places from where it was necessary to throw them out, which we did. Even after agreeing to ceasefire, they did not vacate 2 or 3 heights on the line of control, very close to the line of control. And I took permission from the Prime Minister to attack those. And it was only when we made them vacate and they suffered casualties that we declared that, yes, we have achieved our task, achieved our mission. And that is why you see 26th July being commemorated for that victory.
Yes, I think that happens in any war. After a ceasefire agreement has reached, there are these small little pockets or which actually require operations to smoothen out. It has happened after the 1971 ceasefire agreement. Also, a couple of these attacks had to put it into effect. In fact, sir, from this question, I want to ask you a supplementary, or I correct our understanding for everybody's benefit. If there was any effect of the US pressure on us, when I say us, on both the countries, I think it was more on us, because I think whenever we did not, we tied our hands behind our back, whether it was with the Air Force not crossing or us not crossing the LC, as you mentioned earlier. I think more of those were asking India to act a little more matured, lest it spirals out of control and lest it leads to bigger thing, including the nuclear threat.
So I must mention 3 things to you. Firstly, USA had intelligence, did not share it with us in the beginning at all. Let's be clear on that. Second thing is that round about 16th of June, the NSA met the NSA of USA in Europe, and there Sandy Berger, and he told him very clearly that, look, we will not be able to hold our armed forces. They are very keen to cross the line of control and or the IB. So he says, we have put that restraint, but we do not know how long it will take for us to keep them. And that was a very clear message sent to USA through the NSA of USA to Sandy Berger, and he was told that, look, give us a few more days. We want to work on Pakistan, and we want to see that they vacate all these areas. And the third one, as I said, was that although during that period when Nawaz Sharif was called, Nawaz Sharif went, not called, but he went to USA, we got a call. The president of USA sent a call to Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, he should also go, Prime Minister Vijay, which Prime Minister Vijay flatly refused, that there is no way that I am coming there. And as far as I'm concerned, our objective and aim remains the same. Unless they vacate that area, the war will go on. So these are the 3 circumstances I must mention. So it was not all that kind of a favor done by anybody. I think we were standing on our feet, and very strongly, all the way from Prime Minister down to the troops on the ground.
Thank you, sir. Absolutely. Absolutely put in the correct perspective for all of us, sir. Thank you very much. And I know you're also running out of time. You have another event to attend. I think we have.
I can be here with you till 5:20, so we still got about 9 minutes more.
Very well. Very
9 or 10, 9, 10 minutes.
Very well. Thank you, sir. That gives me a leeway for a couple of questions, and before we for a closing remarks from your side. Mahadevan, you just spoke with him a little while ago from Australia. He asked this question. I'm sorry, the question is not from Mahadevan, it's from Mr. Ritik Singh. How do you analyze the paradigm shift, which is attributed as fifth generation warfare? And how do you see India fighting this out, especially in the context of Chinese aggression?
Yeah, there has been a paradigm shift in the nature of conflict. There is no doubt about it. And, I must emphasize that the nature of conflict has always changed, but today you see it changing much faster, primarily because of the geopolitical situation and also the technological impact that we have. And technology is making a huge impact on the nature of conflict. And today we are now talking about cyber war, we are talking of information war, we are talking of drones and the UAVs and weapon carrying UAVs. We are talking of space war. So we have to cope up with all these developments, unfortunately. And as far as China is concerned, as I said earlier, they are ahead of us on technology. And we have to accept that fact. And therefore, we should try much faster today to catch up with technology, to have the same kind of capabilities that they have. It may not be possible to have exactly the same, but we should be close to them. Otherwise, there will be a major strategic gap and disadvantage to us. So technology today is the prime mover of the nature of conflict, whether it is an attacker or it is a defender. We must remember that. And in that context, I would say it's not only the technology, but our human resource also has to be more technically oriented. And today you cannot have people who cannot sign their, so we have to have our troops who are better educated and scientifically, technologically oriented. And similarly, our officers also. This requires both from the point of technology in our weapons, equipment, as well as our human resource.
True, sir. That's a very interesting fact that you mentioned. I mean, technology is a part. The man that runs the technology, men have to be aware. In 60s, 70s, and earlier, we used to have men who used to still anguta chap for their pay. And their
I just gave an example. Yes, you and I, we have seen that.
Yes, sir. And also the fact that we used to be in our units, our ladies used to be teaching, the officers' wives used to be actually trying to teach soldiers' wives how to read and write so they could write letters home. Today, all of us have the same WhatsApp, whether it is soldier, his wife, or us and our families. So technology, we have come a long way. But you're right about the fact that when it comes to operating these technologies for communication, it's social communication, it is okay. But when it comes to operating these technologies for purposes of combat, we have to understand that there are a lot of different intricacies that come up today, sir. It's not only drone, and drone will still be counted towards the kinetic, but what about the information space? Now that is another bit of technology. That's another dimension that we have to understand. China today, more than others, is playing this game. I dare say this is playing this game better than we are. And we really need to catch up on this.
You mentioned about information war. There is no doubt that they are more aggressive than we are in that. And not only within China, but outside China also. That's the way they are playing that information war game. But what is more important is not just weapons and equipment. I've been talking about that, but our systems have to change. We have to adopt the new technologies today so that we are all the time at the same wavelength at different levels. And therefore, then the decision making becomes much faster. The information distribution of information is faster. The decision making is faster. So all the system that we have got within the armed forces, within each service, as well as amongst the three services. Those have to be also improved rapidly. And unless we do that, the synergy which is required in the modern warfare, it will not come through.
So thank you very much. And I'm going to just scrolling through for this question. Yes, sir. This is Sri Sudarshan. Why did Kargil war last 3 months despite better technology and equipment? On the same lines, why is LAC issue ongoing with China beyond 1 year, and is there any resolution to be expected in the near future? The first question about Kargil, when you were at the helm as Army Chief, sir, is something I am too tempted to answer. Why did the war last so long despite technology? But it is only right that you should be telling us what a plodding match it was. Thank you.
Look, as I said, firstly, because there was a total lack of intelligence and surveillance. So first you have to stabilize first you have to collect information and be sure where these people are. Then you have to stabilize the situation, and then you can think of taking an initiative. So that took time. That is the first factor. And the second important factor is that in mountains, you will always take time, particularly where the infrastructure is not there. Those days we had very limited roads and tracks in those areas. And I remember going, people had to walk for almost about 3 to 4 days from the roadhead, 4 days from the roadhead to go to the LOC in Patalik sector. And today we have constructed those tracks. So all that disadvantages we had, and it was a slow this thing, and we had to make sure this is our own territory. You could not leave any gaps. You could not leave somebody behind, and it was just not possible in that frontage of 160 kilometers. So we were fighting continuously from literally Kaubal Gully, which is north of Zojila, right up to the southern glacier. All along the fight was going on, and it took time. In mountains, you will always take much greater time than you do it in the plains.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. And I'm just one quick last question, because this is important. Mr. Zongte, a question from him. Can you share your views on Fauji's obsessions with Kashmir in your book on the misconception and self-deception of Pakistan?
Say that again.
I'm also going to decipher that with you, sir. Can you share your views on Fauji's obsession with Kashmir in your book on the misconception and self-deception of Pakistan? I mean, essentially, I think while it's perhaps not
from Pakistani point of view. Look,
any point of view.
Yeah, Pakistani point of view. I can understand that. It's obvious. The status that the Pakistan army has today achieved politically, financially, and socially, it is all because of the confrontation with India. And otherwise, they cannot have any confrontation with India, but Kashmir is a live issue. And they will keep Kashmir issue alive. Because if that Kashmir issue is resolved in any way, then their own existence in Pakistan will be doubted by people. And so therefore, Kashmir becomes important for them for their own survival and for the kind of status that they have achieved. So it is not that, and because they cannot fight, having fought 3 wars and lost 3 or 4 of them, they have lost it. So they are now dependent on the proxy war. And my own impression is that they're not going to give up proxy war so easily. And so that is the main reason, the obsession about Kashmir and the Pakistan army. It's not going to soon. It affects their, should I say, genes today, having been brought up in that fashion. And they don't want to give up the authority, the kingmaker status that they have enjoyed, they are enjoying in Pakistan even today.
True, sir. Thank you, sir. Kashmir seems to be the glue that binds Pakistan today. And true to the word, the chief had ordered, and 1720 it is right now. Sir, thank you very much for being here. And I salute you as the chief who led us to victory during Kargil war. But there were so many astounding stories of bravery, soldiers, young boys who led the attacks upwards, and day after day would come back in the national tricolor. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank
And
you, Satish.
I hand you back
Thank
to.
you, Satish. The credit must go to all soldiers, including you. You were also commanding a battalion at that time on a different front, I know. But so it is the combined effort of the armed forces which helped us to win the war, along with the support that we got from civil agencies and the political authority. So when you are thanking me, it is, I think, I would say that the troops who fought the war, who were on the front line, they are the real deserving people. Thank you very much. I quite enjoyed the session with you.
Thank you. Before I hand over to General Murthy, sir, it is always a combined effort, and we are trying to enhance that combined effort in today's journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for your very deep and insightful views into this from sheer experience and your very vast knowledge and the complete international, national scene you covered so well, sir. Thank you very much indeed, and for your great leadership, that we were victorious during Kargil War, and the lessons that we have learned, I'm sure we have taken them forward, as we can all see, sir. Thank you very much, sir. And Jai Hind on this very auspicious day, sir.
Thank you, and thank you everybody else. It was nice. And Jai Hind to all of you.
I would also like to thank Satish, sir, for this excellent conduct of this question-answer session, this conversation he has had with you. Thanks to the entire CASA team for their support, and above all for our attendees who were listening with rapt attention and had forwarded some excellent questions. Thank you all very much, and Jai Hind, everybody.
Jai Hind. Thank you.
Jai Hind, sir.
Thank you, sir.